The screaming started at 3:17 on a Tuesday afternoon. Not the playful shrieks of children splashing in the Naval Academy pool, but the raw, primal terror that cuts through concrete walls and stops hearts cold. Admiral Marcus Blackwater's 12-year-old son had been showing off for his friends, attempting a dive from the high board he wasn't supposed to touch. Now he was floating face down in 8 feet of water, motionless as a broken toy. Chaos erupted poolside. Instructors shouted commands. Cadets froze in panic. The Admiral himself stood paralyzed, his decorated chest heaving with the kind of fear no amount of combat experience could prepare him for. 20 seconds passed. 30. The boy's body began to sink. Then, a figure in faded coveralls vaulted the fence. Samuel "Tank" Morrison had been replacing pool filters in the mechanical room when the screaming reached him. No one noticed the quiet janitor, who cleaned their floors and emptied their trash cans. No one knew that beneath those work-stained clothes lived a man whose call sign had once been whispered in the darkest corners of SEAL Team 6. No one suspected that the invisible maintenance worker was about to save the life of a boy whose father had destroyed his career 15 years ago. As Tank hit the water, he whispered 2 words that would shatter everything. Ghost diver. The pool deck fell silent, except for the splash of a legend returning from the dead. The United States Naval Academy carried itself with the weight of tradition. Every brick and beam humming with 2 centuries of honor, discipline, and carefully polished excellence. The morning sun painted Bancroft Hall in golden light, casting long shadows across the yard, where future officers marched in perfect formation, their white uniforms crisp as fresh snow, their futures bright as the medals they dreamed of earning. But in the basement levels, away from the pageantry and pride, Samuel Morrison pushed his maintenance cart through corridors that smelled of industrial cleaner and forgotten corners. His Navy coveralls were clean but faded, softened by years of honest work. His hands, scarred and calloused, gripped the cart handle with the steady precision of a man who had learned to find purpose in routine. At 42, Sam carried himself with a quiet dignity that made people look twice, though they rarely did. His graying hair was cut short, military neat out of habit rather than regulation. His eyes, pale blue and steady, missed nothing, a quality that had once made him invaluable in places most people couldn't imagine, and now helped him navigate the invisible world of those who served without recognition. The Academy's Olympic-sized pool complex was Sam's Tuesday responsibility. He arrived at 0600, 2 hours before the first swim classes began, when the chlorinated air hung still and peaceful. The morning light filtering through the high windows turned the water into liquid sapphires, undisturbed and perfect. Sam worked methodically, testing chemical levels, cleaning the deck, ensuring every detail met the exacting standards the Academy demanded. He had been doing this job for 3 years, ever since he'd answered a classified ad for maintenance technician, and submitted to the background check that raised eyebrows but revealed nothing disqualifying. His references were sparse but solid. His work ethic was unquestionable. His past remained exactly where he preferred it, buried. The only photo in his small efficiency apartment showed a smiling woman with kind eyes and a laugh that could light up rooms. Sarah Morrison, Lieutenant, United States Navy, lost in a training accident 7 years ago. The same accident that had ended Sam's career and sent him searching for a life that made sense without the woman who had been his anchor, his purpose, his everything. Now, his purpose was simpler. Show up, work hard, go home. Keep the past locked down where it couldn't hurt anyone else. Make sure the Academy's facilities ran smoothly so the next generation of officers could pursue the dreams he'd once shared. By 0800, the pool area began filling with voices. advanced swimming classes for second-year midshipmen, water survival training, competitive practices for the Academy's nationally ranked swim team. Sam retreated to the mechanical room, where the rhythmic hum of pumps and filters provided the soundtrack for invisible work. He was replacing a clogged filter housing when the voices outside shifted. Laughter, splashing, the easy confidence of young people showing off for each other. Through the small window of the mechanical room, Sam could see a group of kids who clearly didn't belong to any official academy program. They were too young, maybe 10 to 13 years old, wearing civilian swim gear instead of regulation attire. Sam recognized them as children of academy staff and visiting dignitaries, the kind of privilege that occasionally bent rules. A birthday party, perhaps, or a special tour that included pool time. He'd seen it before. The academy took care of its extended family, especially when that family included flag officers and distinguished alumni. At the center of the group, a boy with sun-bleached hair and his father's confident jaw was holding court. 12 years old and already carrying himself like someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Sam didn't need to see the adult supervision to know whose son this was. The resemblance to Admiral Marcus Blackwater was unmistakable. The Admiral himself stood poolside, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes, checking his watch repeatedly. Even off-duty, Marcus Blackwater radiated the controlled intensity that had earned him 3 stars and a reputation as one of the Navy's most demanding leaders. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his polo shirt pressed, his bearing military straight despite the casual setting. Sam had seen the Admiral, around the academy, usually flanked by aides, and moving with the purposeful energy of someone whose time was measured in national importance. They had never spoken. In 3 years, Blackwater had never acknowledged Sam's existence, not unusual, since admirals rarely noticed janitors, but somehow it felt more deliberate than simple oversight. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The boy Dylan, Sam had overheard someone call him, was showing off increasingly dangerous stunts. Starting with simple dives, then attempting flips, each one more elaborate and less controlled than the last. His friends cheered him on, their voices echoing off the high ceiling, their laughter bright and careless. "Watch this one," Dylan called out, climbing the ladder to the high diving platform 20 feet above the pool. "Dad? You watching?" Admiral Blackwater looked up from his phone, nodded absently, then returned to whatever crisis required his immediate attention. The gesture was small, but telling a father present in body, but absent in spirit. Love constrained by duty and the weight of command. Sam felt his chest tighten. He knew that look had worn it himself too many times. The expression of a man trying to balance impossible demands, always falling short somewhere, always carrying the guilt of choices that left someone disappointed. Dylan reached the platform and struck a pose, arms spread wide like a conquering hero. "Prepare to witness greatness," he announced to his audience below. But as he prepared to dive, Sam noticed what the boy had missed in his excitement. A maintenance ladder had been left partially extended into the diving zone, its metal frame creating an invisible hazard just beneath the water's surface. Sam dropped the filter cartridge and moved toward the door. He was 20 yards away, behind soundproof glass, with no way to shout a warning loud enough to be heard. Dylan was already in motion, his dive a perfect arc of youthful confidence and deadly miscalculation. The impact was sickening. Not the clean splash of a successful dive, but the dull thud of flesh meeting steel, followed by the splash of a body hitting water without control. For a heartbeat, the pool deck fell silent. Then the screaming started. Dylan floated face down, motionless, his blond hair spreading like seaweed around his head. Blood began to cloud the water near his scalp. His friends stood frozen at the pool's edge, their celebration turning to horror in the space between one breath and the next. Admiral Blackwater dropped his phone, the device clattering across the deck as he rushed toward the water. But his dress shoes slipped on the wet concrete, sending him sprawling. He scrambled to his feet, uniform soaked, eyes wild with the kind of panic that strips away rank and leaves only a father watching his child die. "Someone, help him!" Blackwater shouted, his voice cracking. "Somebody help my son!" The Academy's swim instructors were in the training pool on the other side of the complex. The on-duty lifeguards were at lunch break. The only adults present were civilian guests who stood paralyzed by shock and their own limitations. 30 seconds passed. Dylan's body began to sink. Sam burst through the mechanical room door like a man shot from a cannon. He vaulted the safety fence in a single fluid motion, his work boots finding purchase on the wet deck. With the sure-footed confidence of someone who had once moved through far more dangerous terrain, as he reached the pool's edge, something shifted in Sam's bearing. The quiet maintenance worker disappeared, replaced by someone else entirely. His movements became economical, precise, purposeful, his eyes locked onto Dylan's position, with the cold calculation of a man who had pulled bodies from water before, in places where failure meant death, and hesitation was a luxury no one could afford. "Call 911, Sam commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made Admiral Blackwater step back instinctively. "Now, tell them possible head trauma, potential spinal injury, child victim, Naval Academy pool complex." Then, Sam dove. The water was crystalline clear, heated to exactly 78 degrees, chemically balanced to perfection. Sam cut through it like a blade, his body remembering movements practiced 10,000 times in oceans and rivers and flooded ship compartments where visibility was zero, and the stakes were life or death. He reached Dylan in 4 powerful strokes. The boy was unconscious but breathing, blood seeping from a gash along his hairline, his body limp but not lifeless. Sam's hands moved with clinical efficiency, checking for spinal alignment, ensuring the airway remained clear, calculating the safest method of extraction. As he began the delicate process of bringing Dylan to the surface, Sam whispered words no one else could hear, part prayer, part protocol, part promise to a boy who couldn't hear him but needed him anyway. "Ghost diver has you, son. You're going to be okay." The surface erupted as Sam emerged, Dylan cradled against his chest with the practiced ease of someone who had carried wounded men through much worse than chlorinated water. He supported the boy's head and neck with one arm while his legs kicked with mechanical efficiency, maintaining perfect buoyancy despite the dead weight in his arms. "I need a backboard," Sam called out as he reached the shallow end, "and someone who knows how to use it." Admiral Blackwater stood at the pool's edge, water dripping from his soaked uniform, his face a battlefield of relief and confusion. His son was alive, breathing. But the man who had saved him was a stranger, a janitor who moved with the precision of a Navy SEAL and spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Who are you?" Blackwater whispered, but Sam was already focused on the next phase of the rescue. With infinite care, Sam positioned Dylan against the pool wall, supporting his weight while keeping the boy's spine perfectly aligned. His hands never stopped moving, checking pulse, monitoring breathing, assessing neurological response with the systematic thoroughness of someone with advanced medical training. The Academy's emergency response team arrived in a cascade of radio chatter and professional efficiency. Paramedics, campus security, the duty officer who had been pulled from his morning briefing by reports of a medical emergency at the pool complex. As the paramedics took over Dylan's care, Sam stepped back into the shadows. His coveralls were soaked, his work boots squelched with every step. But he had already returned to invisibility, just another maintenance worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But Admiral Blackwater's eyes never left him. As Dylan was stabilized and loaded onto a stretcher, as the chaos of medical response swirled around the pool deck, Marcus Blackwater found himself staring at the quiet man in wet coveralls who had just pulled his son from the edge of death. "Wait," the Admiral called out as Sam began to retreat toward the mechanical room. "I need to know your name." Sam paused, his hand on the door handle, his back still turned. For a moment, he seemed to weigh something invisible, some calculation that had nothing to do with pool maintenance and everything to do with the careful distance he had spent 3 years maintaining. Finally, he turned around. His pale blue eyes met Blackwater's gaze directly, without deference or challenge, with the steady regard of one warrior acknowledging another. "Samuel Morrison," he said simply. "Pool maintenance? That wasn't pool maintenance," Blackwater replied, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent deck. "That was something else entirely." The paramedic team began moving Dylan toward the exit, their radio chatter filling the air with medical terminology and transport coordinates. But neither man moved, caught in a moment of recognition that felt larger than the sum of its parts. "Your son is going to be fine," Sam said, his voice gentle now, the command authority fading back into something more human. "Concussion, probable stitches, but kids are resilient. He'll have a story to tell." "Thanks to you," Blackwater said. Then, after a pause that seemed to stretch forever, "How did you know exactly what to do?" Sam's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Memory, perhaps, or pain, or the weight of truths that couldn't be spoken in mixed company. "Training," he said finally. "Long time ago." Admiral Blackwater studied the man before him, the scars on his hands, the military bearing that couldn't be completely disguised, the calm competence that spoke of experiences far removed from filter maintenance and pool chemicals. Pieces of a puzzle began to arrange themselves in his mind, forming a picture he wasn't sure he was ready to see clearly. "Mr. Morrison," he said carefully, "I'd like to speak with you further. When things settle down, if you're willing." Sam nodded once. "You know where to find me." As the emergency vehicles departed and the pool complex returned to its morning quiet, Sam retrieved the dropped filter cartridge and returned to his work. But the routine felt different now, lighter somehow, as if something that had been held underwater for too long had finally surfaced. Admiral Blackwater stood alone on the pool deck, his soaked uniform beginning to dry in the morning sun, his son's blood still visible on the water's surface, despite the filtration system's best efforts. He was a man accustomed to having answers, to understanding the people under his command and the systems that supported his authority. But Samuel Morrison remained a question mark, a mystery wrapped in coveralls and competence, a ghost who had materialized exactly when needed, and then faded back into the invisible world of those who served without recognition. As the Admiral finally departed for the hospital, he found himself wondering what other secrets moved through his academy's corridors, what other stories were hidden behind the faces he never bothered to see. And in the mechanical room, Sam Morrison returned to his filters and chemical levels, carrying the weight of a conversation that would have to happen eventually, whether he wanted it or not. The past, it seemed, had a way of surfacing despite all efforts to keep it submerged. The ghost, whether he liked it or not, was about to be seen. The Naval Hospital at Bethesda carried the antiseptic scent of efficiency and the muffled urgency that lived in places where life and death decisions happened every hour. Admiral Marcus Blackwater sat in the pediatric waiting room, his uniform finally dry but wrinkled beyond regulation. His phone buzzing incessantly with messages from his staff that he couldn't bring himself to answer. Dylan was stable. 12 stitches, a concussion that would require monitoring, and a story that would follow him for the rest of his life. The doctors spoke in measured tones about lucky outcomes and close calls, but Marcus heard only the echo of his son's body hitting the water, the sickening moment when parental authority meant nothing against the laws of physics and momentum. His wife, Catherine, had arrived from her gallery opening in Georgetown, trading her designer dress for the comfortable desperation of a mother whose child had nearly drowned. She sat beside Marcus now, her hand resting on his knee, her eyes red from tears that had finally stopped falling. "He's asking for you," she said softly. The nurse said, "You can go in." Dylan's hospital room was painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite disguise the medical equipment monitoring his vital signs. The boy looked smaller in the hospital bed, his blonde hair matted against a bandaged scalp. His usual confidence replaced by the fragile pallor that followed trauma. "Dad," Dylan whispered as Marcus approached the bed. "Did you see what happened? That janitor guy? He saved me." Marcus sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his hand finding Dylan's with the gentle precision of a father who had come too close to losing everything that mattered. "I saw," Marcus replied. "He was very brave. He moved like you do," Dylan continued, his voice gaining strength. "Like when you're being an admiral, all serious and knowing exactly what to do. But he was just a janitor." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. From the mouths of babes came observations that cut straight to the heart of mysteries adults spent years trying to unravel. "Sometimes people are more than they appear," Marcus said carefully. "Sometimes the most important people are the ones we don't notice." Dylan nodded solemnly, his 12-year-old mind processing truths that would have challenged adults. "I want to thank him properly. Like, write a letter or something. Mom always says thank you notes are important." Marcus smiled despite everything. "That's a good idea. We'll make sure he gets it." But even as he made the promise, Marcus knew that a simple thank you note wouldn't be enough. Samuel Morrison had questions to answer, and Marcus Blackwater was accustomed to getting answers to questions that mattered. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, the kind of Washington weather that made everyone move a little slower and think a little deeper. Marcus arrived at the academy early, before the morning formations began their familiar rhythms, when the corridors still held the quiet that preceded institutional awakening. He found Samuel Morrison exactly where he expected. In the pool complex, testing chemical levels with the methodical precision of a man who understood that details mattered. Sam looked up as Marcus entered, nodded politely, then returned to his work without the deference most people showed flag officers. "How's Dylan?" Sam asked, without looking up from his test kit. No pretense, no small talk. Just the direct question of someone who genuinely cared about the answer. 12 stitches, and a headache that should fade in a few days. Marcus replied. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." Sam nodded, relief flickering across his features before he controlled it. "Good. Head injuries in children can be unpredictable." The casual medical knowledge hung in the air between them like a flag. Neither man wanted to salute. Marcus found himself studying Sam more carefully, the way he moved with economic precision. The scars on his hands that spoke of experiences far removed from pool maintenance, the bearing that suggested command experience despite the civilian coveralls. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said carefully, "I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind." Sam set down the test strips and turned to face him fully. "I figured you would. Your personnel file is interesting," Marcus continued. Clean background check. Excellent work performance. But very few details about your previous employment. No military service listed. But yesterday, you moved like someone with extensive water rescue training. I've always been a strong swimmer, Sam replied, his voice neutral but not dismissive. That wasn't just swimming, Marcus pressed. That was combat rescue technique. Textbook water extraction with spinal precautions. The kind of training that takes years to master and even longer to execute under pressure. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his pale blue eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that felt like assessment. Finally, he spoke. Admiral, with respect, my job here is to maintain your facilities. I do that job well. Yesterday, I helped a child in distress because it was the right thing to do. Beyond that, I'm not sure what you're looking for. I'm looking for the truth, Marcus said simply, because something doesn't add up, and in my experience, when things don't add up around military installations, it usually means there's more to the story. Sam turned back to his chemical testing, but his movements had become more deliberate, more careful. What kind of truth are you looking for, sir? The kind that explains how a pool maintenance worker knows advanced medical protocols, Marcus replied. The kind that explains why you carry yourself like someone who's been in command. The kind that explains why, when I ran your name through certain databases last night, I got results that raised more questions than they answered. Sam's hands stilled completely. When he looked up, his expression had shifted into something harder, more guarded. You ran my name through databases? I have a son who nearly died yesterday, Marcus said quietly. I have an obligation to understand who saved him and why. And what did you find? Marcus pulled a manila folder from his briefcase and set it on the pool deck between them. Samuel Morrison, born 1981, Philadelphia. High school graduate. Some college. Clean criminal record. But here's what's interesting. There's a 7-year gap in your employment history, from 2001 to 2008. You essentially don't exist in any civilian database. Sam stared at the folder, but didn't reach for it. Then, in 2008, you surface again, Marcus continued. Working construction in San Diego, then moving to Norfolk for maritime maintenance. Always jobs that required security clearances, but never anything high profile. Always competent, always reliable, always somehow invisible. Lots of people have employment gaps, Sam said carefully. Not gaps like this, Marcus replied. Not gaps that coincide with major military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not gaps that end with a person appearing in Norfolk. With the kind of references that suggest special operations background, but can't be verified through normal channels. The silence stretched between them, filled with the gentle hum of pool, equipment, and the weight of unspoken truths. Sam finally picked up his test kit and began packing it away with movements that suggested he was preparing to leave. Admiral, he said without looking up, I appreciate your curiosity, but some stories are better left buried. I'm good at my job here. I don't cause problems. I helped your son because any decent person would have done the same. That's all you need to know. Is it? Marcus asked. Because last night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how you moved in that water, how you knew exactly what to do, how you took command of the situation without hesitation. And I realized something. Sam paused in his packing. I realized that in 30 years of military service, I've only seen that kind of performance under pressure from a very specific type of person. Marcus continued. The kind of person who's been places and done things that don't appear in official records. The kind of person whose service is so classified that even admirals don't get to know about it. Sam straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. You're fishing, Admiral? Maybe, Marcus admitted. But here's what I think happened. I think Samuel Morrison is exactly who his paperwork says. He is a man who served his country in ways that can't be documented, who came home to find that the skills that kept him alive over there didn't translate easily to civilian life. I think he found work that let him serve without glory, contribute without recognition, and remain invisible by choice rather than by circumstance. The words hit their target. Sam's careful composure cracked slightly, revealing something raw and unguarded beneath. And I think, Marcus continued gently, that yesterday, when my son needed help, all that training and experience came flooding back, because heroes don't retire, they just find different ways to serve. Sam was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if he'd pushed too hard. Then, unexpectedly, Sam smiled, not the polite expression of a maintenance worker, but something warmer and more genuine. "Your son has your eyes," Sam said finally, "and your stubborn streak, apparently." "He gets that from his mother," Marcus replied, and felt the tension in the air begin to shift. "Admiral," Sam said carefully, "if I were the kind of person you think I am, there would be reasons why that information stays classified. Reasons that protect more than just me." "I understand operational security," Marcus replied. "I'm not asking for details that could compromise ongoing missions or endanger personnel. I'm asking to understand the man who saved my son's life." Sam studied him for another long moment, then reached into his coverall pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. He placed it on the pool deck between them, a challenge coin, worn smooth at the edges, with markings that would mean nothing to most people, but everything to those who knew what to look for. Marcus picked up the coin and turned, it over in his hands. The insignia was deliberately obscure, but he recognized elements the trident of naval special warfare, symbols that suggested underwater operations, markings that spoke of units that existed in the shadows between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability. "Ghost diver," Sam said quietly. "That was my call sign." The name hit Marcus like a physical force. Ghost diver, a legend whispered in the darkest corners of special operations, a man who could appear and disappear underwater like a phantom, who had pulled off extractions that shouldn't have been possible and left no trace except the lives he'd saved. "Dear God," Marcus whispered. "You're real." "Was real," Sam corrected. "That man died with his wife 7 years ago. Samuel Morrison, pool maintenance, is all that's left." The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded, carrying years of grief that no amount of service or sacrifice could heal. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Recognition giving way to respect, curiosity transforming into something deeper and more human. "What happened?" Marcus asked softly. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused somewhere beyond the pool complex, beyond the academy, beyond the careful distance he'd maintained from his own past. "Training accident," he said finally. "Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, naval aviator. Mechanical failure during a routine flight. She had 3 seconds to choose between ejecting over a populated area or riding it in. She wrote it in." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He knew that story, had heard it in briefings, had signed condolence letters for families destroyed by the kind of split-second decisions that separated heroes from statistics. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "The Navy wanted me to keep going," Sam continued. "New missions, new operations, same old ghost diver disappearing into dark water to save people who would never know my name. But I couldn't do it anymore. Every mission felt like borrowed time. Every extraction reminded me that I could save strangers, but couldn't save the one person who mattered most. So, you walked away. I walked away. Sam confirmed. Took my clearances and my scars and my guilt, and found work that let me serve without risking anyone else's life if I made a mistake. Marcus looked around the pool complex, the pristine water, the carefully maintained equipment, the attention to detail that ensured safety for hundreds of people who would never know how lucky they were to have someone like Sam Morrison watching over them. You didn't stop serving, Marcus said quietly. You just changed how you serve. Sam's smile was sad, but genuine. Some days I tell myself that. Other days, I wonder if I'm just hiding. Yesterday wasn't hiding, Marcus replied firmly. Yesterday was everything the Navy hopes to build in its people: courage, competence, selfless service when it matters most. My son is alive because you didn't hesitate, because you put his life ahead of your own safety. Because when the moment came, you were exactly who you needed to be. For the first time since the conversation began, Sam looked directly into Marcus's eyes, and what passed between them was recognition not just of shared service, but of shared understanding of what it meant to carry responsibility for other people's lives. Thank you, Sam said simply. No, Marcus replied. Thank you. For yesterday. For keeping my boy safe when I couldn't. For being the kind of person who saves lives without asking for credit. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two men who had spent their careers in service to something larger than themselves, finally seeing each other clearly. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything, and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Admiral? Sam said finally, I have a request. Anything. Your son wants to write me a thank you note, Sam said. I'd like that, but I'd also like something else. What's that? Sam gestured toward the pool, where morning light was beginning to filter through the high windows, turning the water into liquid gold. I'd like to teach him to swim properly, Sam said. Real swimming, not just showing off for friends. Water safety, rescue techniques, respect for the environment that almost killed him. If you're willing to trust me with something that important. Marcus felt something warm and unexpected bloom in his chest. Trust, not the institutional trust of rank and regulation, but the personal trust of one father to another, one warrior to another. I think that's exactly what he needs, Marcus said, and exactly what you need too. Sam's smile was the first completely unguarded expression Marcus had seen from him. Tuesday mornings, before the academy classes start. Just the two of us and the water. I'll teach him to respect it instead of fighting it. He'll be here, Marcus promised. As they shook hands, Marcus realized that something fundamental had shifted. Yesterday, Samuel Morrison had been invisible, a maintenance worker whose existence barely registered on the periphery of institutional awareness. Today, he was Ghost Diver, a legend stepping out of the shadows to share his knowledge with the next generation. But more than that, he was simply a good man who had chosen to keep serving quietly and without recognition, making the world safer, one pool chemical test at a time. Sam, Marcus said as they prepared to part ways, for what it's worth, I don't think that man died 7 years ago. I think he just learned to swim in different waters. Sam nodded, understanding passing between them like a current beneath still surface. See you Tuesday, Admiral. See you Tuesday, Ghost Diver. As Marcus walked away, he found himself thinking about visibility and invisibility, about the people who served, without recognition, and the legends that lived quietly among us. His son had nearly died, but in the process, both father and child had discovered something valuable, that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and sometimes the most important people are the ones we almost never see. The academy continued its morning routines around them, but something had changed. Ghost Diver was no longer invisible. and Admiral Blackwater was no longer blind to the quiet heroes who made his world possible. The pool reflected morning light like a mirror, waiting for Tuesday, when a legend would teach a boy to respect the water that had nearly claimed his life, and a friendship would begin that would change them all. 3 weeks into their Tuesday morning sessions, Dylan Blackwater had transformed from a reckless show-off into something resembling a serious student of the water. Sam Morrison watched the boy execute a perfect rescue breathing technique. His movements economical and precise, his earlier bravado replaced by focused concentration. "Remember," Sam called from the pool's edge, "water doesn't care how brave you think you are. It only respects preparation and respect." Dylan surfaced, treading water with the easy efficiency Sam had drilled into him. "Like you always say, the water will teach you if you listen, but it'll kill you if you don't." Sam smiled, pride warming his chest. The boy had his father's intensity, but was learning humility the hard way, through repetition and respect, rather than near-death experience. These Tuesday mornings had become something Sam hadn't expected to find again, purpose that had nothing to do with his own survival. Admiral Blackwater usually watched from the observation deck, maintaining careful distance while his son learned lessons that went far beyond swimming technique. But this morning, Marcus wasn't alone. A woman in civilian clothes sat beside him, taking notes with the focused attention of someone conducting official business. Sam noticed her immediately trained eyes, cataloging details that didn't belong. Government sedan in the parking lot, credentials hanging from her jacket. The careful way she positioned herself to observe without being obvious about it. When she looked at him, her gaze held the clinical assessment of someone building a file. "Dylan," Sam called. "That's enough for today. Good work." As the boy toweled off and joined his father upstairs, the woman approached the pool deck alone. She was 40-something, professional in a way that suggested federal employment, carrying herself with the controlled confidence of someone accustomed to asking uncomfortable questions. "Mr. Morrison? I'm Agent Jennifer Walsh, Naval Criminal Investigative Service." She showed her credentials with practiced efficiency. "I'd like to speak with you about your background." Sam's expression didn't change, but every instinct he'd spent 3 years suppressing suddenly roared to life. NCIS didn't show up at pool, maintenance interviews without reason, and the timing just as he'd begun to emerge from invisibility felt deliberate. "What can I help you with, Agent Walsh? There are some inconsistencies in your security clearance file that require clarification," she said, settling into the careful language of official inquiry. "Gaps in your employment history that don't align with the references provided when you were hired." Sam set down his pool testing kit with deliberate calm. "I've been through background checks before. Everything was approved for my current position." "Yes, but that was before you became a person of interest in a broader investigation," Walsh replied. "Before Admiral Blackwater began asking questions about classified operations that may have involved someone with your particular skill set." The words hung in the chlorinated air, like a threat wrapped in bureaucracy. Sam felt the careful distance he'd maintained from his past collapsing, the invisible walls that had protected his new life, crumbling under the weight of official curiosity. "Admiral Blackwater saved a child," Sam said carefully. "I don't see how that constitutes a security concern." "The concern isn't what you did," Walsh replied. "It's who you might be, and whether that identity poses risks to ongoing operations or personnel security." From the observation deck, Dylan's voice carried down, excited and innocent. "Dad, Sam says next week he'll teach me how to swim in gear." Like real Navy training. Both adults looked up at the boy, his face bright with anticipation, completely unaware that the man he admired was being investigated for the crime of having served his country too well in places that officially didn't exist. "Agent Walsh," Sam said quietly, "I understand you have a job to do, but that boy up there almost died 3 weeks ago, and he's learning lessons that might save his life someday. Whatever questions you have about my past can wait until he's finished learning how to respect the water that nearly killed him." Walsh studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You care about him. I care about doing the job I was hired to do," Sam replied. "And right now, that includes making sure Admiral Blackwater's son doesn't end up face down in a pool again." "The job you were hired to do is maintenance," Walsh pointed out. "The job I'm actually doing is keeping people safe," Sam corrected. "Same as it's always been? Just different water." Walsh pulled a tablet from her briefcase and scrolled through documents Sam couldn't see. Samuel Morrison, discharged from active duty in 2008 following the death of Lieutenant Sarah Morrison. Exemplary service record, multiple commendations for actions that remain classified, clean psychological evaluation, but noted concerns about ability to function in team environments following personal loss. Sam's jaw tightened. "You've done your homework. It's an interesting file," Walsh continued. "A man with your capabilities, choosing pool maintenance over lucrative private security contracts. A ghost diver working in a municipal job when you could be training special operations units for 6 figures a year. Maybe I like the quiet. Or maybe you're hiding from something," Walsh suggested. "The kind of something that makes experienced operators disappear into civilian jobs where they won't be found." The accusation hung between them like a challenge. Sam felt anger rise in his chest, not at the investigation itself, but at the assumption that service and sacrifice must hide darker motivations. "Agent Walsh," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made her step back slightly. "I've spent 15 years of my life in service to this country. I've pulled men from burning ships, extracted hostages from hostile territory, and completed missions that will never see daylight in any official report. I came home to bury my wife, and I chose to spend the rest of my life doing something simple and useful that doesn't require anyone else to risk their life for my decisions." He gestured toward the pool, where morning light turned the water into liquid gold. "This job lets me serve without commanding, contribute without risk, and make sure that facilities like this operate safely, so that children like Dylan Blackwater don't drown. Because someone didn't check the chemical levels, or notice that a maintenance ladder was in the wrong position." Walsh was quiet for a moment, her clinical assessment giving way to something more human. "But now, you're teaching again," she observed, "training the Admiral's son, sharing knowledge that comes from classified operations." "I'm teaching a 12-year-old boy how to swim safely," Sam corrected. Skills that any Red Cross instructor could provide, delivered by someone who understands that water safety isn't about showing off. It's about respect and preparation. "And if that boy grows up and wants to follow in your footsteps, joins the Navy, seeks out special operations training, what then?" Sam smiled, and for the first time it wasn't guarded or careful. "Then he'll be ready for it, because someone took the time to teach him that courage isn't about taking stupid risks. It's about being prepared when unavoidable risks present themselves." The conversation was interrupted by footsteps on the tell. The stairs. Admiral Blackwater descended to the pool deck, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes alert to the tension in the air. "Agent Walsh," he said formally. "I wasn't aware NCIS was conducting interviews at my facility." "Routine background verification, Admiral," Walsh replied smoothly, following up on some questions about Mr. Morrison's security clearance. Marcus looked between them, reading the subtext with the skill of someone who had navigated military politics for 3 decades. "And what have you discovered?" "That Mr. Morrison is exactly who his file says he is," Walsh said carefully. "A decorated veteran who chose civilian employment after completing his military service." "And is there a problem with that choice?" Marcus asked, his tone carrying the subtle weight of flag officer displeasure. Walsh hesitated, clearly weighing her words. "No, sir, no problem. Morrison has been providing invaluable service to this facility and to my family. I would hate to see that service interrupted by unnecessary bureaucratic complications." The message was clear. Admiral Blackwater was taking a position, and that position was protective of the man who had saved his son's life. Walsh recognized the dynamics at play. Questioning Ghost Diver was one thing, but challenging an admiral's judgment was another entirely. "Of course, sir," Walsh said. "I think we have everything we need." She gathered her materials with efficient movements, but before leaving, she turned back to Sam. "Mr. Morrison, you should know that your service record is exemplary. Whatever choices you've made since leaving active duty, they reflect well on the training you received and the character you've demonstrated." Sam nodded. "Thank you. And, Mr. Morrison, the boy is lucky to have someone like you teaching him. The Navy could use more instructors who understand that real strength comes from discipline, not bravado." After Walsh departed, Marcus and Sam stood together by the pool's edge, the morning sun casting long shadows across the deck. "That wasn't about your background check," Marcus said quietly. "No," Sam agreed. "That was about someone wondering if Ghost Diver represented a security risk now that he's visible again." "And what did you tell her?" Sam smiled, the expression genuine and unguarded. "I told her that I'm exactly what I appear to be, a man who found a different way to serve." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Dylan wants to know if you'll teach him ocean swimming next month. We have a house on the Chesapeake. Private beach. Sarah and I thought it might be good for him to learn in natural water." The invitation carried weight beyond swimming instruction: trust, acceptance, integration into family life in a way that recognized Sam as more than just a maintenance worker or even a instructor. "I'd be honored," Sam said. From the observation deck, Dylan called down, "Sam! Dad says you used to swim in the ocean all the time. Is it harder than pools?" Sam looked up at the boy, seeing not just Admiral Blackwater's son, but a young man on the threshold of understanding that water, like life, demanded respect, preparation, and the kind of courage that came from knowledge rather than recklessness. "Different, not harder," Sam called back. "The ocean teaches different lessons, but if you listen, it'll teach you everything you need to know about being strong enough to help others when they need it most." Dylan grinned, the expression bright with anticipation and trust. As father and son departed for their respective duties, responsibilities. Dylan to school, where he would tell friends about his swimming lessons with a real hero. Sam returned to his pool maintenance with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Agent Walsh had been wrong about one thing. He wasn't hiding from his past anymore. The past had found him, examined him, and determined that Samuel Morrison and Ghost Diver were the same man. Someone who served with quiet competence, taught with patient wisdom, and understood that the greatest courage often lay in choosing to care for others over personal glory. The investigation was closed, but something larger had opened a future where his skills served not just institutional safety, but the development of a young man who might someday carry those lessons into his own service, his own choices about how strength should be used. The pool reflected morning light like a promise, and for the first time in 7 years, Sam Morrison looked forward to Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, Check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. 6 months later, the Chesapeake Bay rolled gently against the private beach behind the Blackwater family house. Dylan surfaced from his practice dive, treading water with the easy confidence of someone who had learned to work with the ocean rather than against it. "Better," Sam called from chest-deep water. "But remember, the bay is forgiving. Open ocean won't be. Every skill you learn here needs to be twice as strong when the water gets serious." Admiral Blackwater watched from the beach, finally understanding why his son had stopped showing off and started listening. Ghost Diver hadn't just taught Dylan to swim, he had taught him to respect the element that had nearly claimed his life. And in doing so, had begun to teach him what it meant to be the kind of man who could be trusted with other people's safety. The lessons continued, as they always had, in different water but with the same purpose, preparing the next generation to serve with courage, competence, and humility. Some legends retire. Others simply find new ways to pass on what they've learned. The ghost no longer needed to disappear. He had found his way home,